This is a letter written in code, July 17, 1586. A queen's private words are hidden inside cipher symbols. On the back, after the letter was intercepted and deciphered, one of Elizabeth I's intelligence men drew a tiny mark, a gallows, not a sentence by itself, more like an omen attached to the evidence. No army entered the frame, just paper, ink, code, and a state learning to make private words usable in public. The woman who wrote it was Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, Elizabeth's cousin, rival, and prisoner. The men reading it worked inside Elizabeth's intelligence world. In that coded exchange, the Crown believed it had found the danger it needed. Mary's own words linking her to a plot against Elizabeth's life. But the strange part is how that evidence was handled once it was captured. So the question is not simply which queen had the colder heart, it is how a secret cipher, a marked page, and a government built around interception helped move a throne war from bloodline into paperwork. To read that gallows mark properly, strip away the fairy tale version, good queen, bad queen, innocent victim, jealous rival. The mark matters because the letter could be made to travel from secrecy into law, and that depended on what each queen could reach for. On one side is Mary Stuart. She is Elizabeth's cousin, but also a queen in her own right, descended from Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's elder sister. That bloodline gave her a claim many people took seriously. For Catholics who rejected Henry's break with Rome, Elizabeth's legitimacy could look vulnerable. Mary became more than a rival cousin. She became a possible alternative future for England, but Mary's power was fragile. She had lost Scotland, lost freedom, and by the 1580s was trying to act through letters, sympathizers, foreign hopes, and dangerous plots. A cipher was one of the few tools left to her. On the other side is Elizabeth. Her claim sits on the throne, protected by ministers, courts, statutes, prison houses, informants, interceptors, and Walsingham's intelligence network. Those tools could take a private coded exchange and turn it into something commissioners might treat as evidence. So the real comparison is not which woman had darker intentions. It is why one woman's secret words could become fatal once the other woman's state got hold of them. Mary had desperation, dynastic legitimacy, Catholic expectation, and coded letters. Elizabeth had the apparatus that could intercept, decode, preserve, and prosecute. That is why Mary's claim was so hard to ignore, and why the map around her mattered. Mary's claim became dangerous when a family tree turned into a map. She had been Queen of Scots from infancy. She had also been Queen of France for a brief, glittering moment through her first marriage. So when English Catholics questioned Elizabeth's Protestant settlement, Mary was not just a name in a genealogy. She was a living Catholic queen with Tudor blood. That did not mean every Catholic in England was waiting to rebel, or that Europe moved as one bloc. France had civil wars, Spain had imperial calculations, Rome had its religious mission. English Catholic families had to weigh faith, loyalty, fear, and survival inside Elizabeth's kingdom. But imagine the view from Elizabeth's council table, a map spread under candlelight, Protestant England facing powerful Catholic monarchies across the Channel, Mary's name sitting like a pin inside every succession argument. In 1570, the Pope excommunicated Elizabeth, releasing her Catholic subjects, in theory, from obedience to her. Spain, France, and Rome did not need to agree on everything for Mary to matter. If Elizabeth fell, there was a plausible Catholic successor already known across Europe. Then, in 1568, Mary turned that danger into a physical problem. After being forced from power in Scotland, she crossed into England seeking Elizabeth's protection. She brought no army. She brought a royal body, a disputed crown, a Catholic identity, and a claim others could activate. From then on, Mary was no longer a threat across a border. She was inside the realm. Every castle that held her became a pressure point. close enough for English plotters to imagine contact, visible enough for foreign powers to invoke her name, and valuable enough that Elizabeth could neither safely free her nor easily kill her. Mary's flight into England became a chain of houses, wardens, servants, messengers, sealed packets, and locked doors. The question was not only where to keep her, it was how long a queen could be contained before containment itself became the crisis. Elizabeth's restraint was not mercy in the simple sense, it was a form of control. She did not drag Mary straight to a scaffold. For years, she kept her alive, lodged in great houses and castles, surrounded by attendants, watched by appointed keepers, moved from one controlled setting to another as politics shifted. This was not the dungeon version of the story. Mary was a prisoner, but still treated as a queen in ways that mattered, with servants, furniture, correspondence to police, and a household that could never become fully private. The walls around her were rules, inventories, guards, permissions, and reports. For Elizabeth, execution carried a terrifying precedent. If one anointed queen could lawfully kill another, monarchy itself became less sacred. Mary was also Elizabeth's cousin, and killing her could hand Catholic Europe a royal martyr. So Elizabeth chose delay. But every year Mary remained alive. She remained available to exiles, priests, foreign ambassadors, and young English Catholics who imagined that removing Elizabeth would bring restoration, not chaos. Mary did not need to command all of them. Her existence gave their plans a name. By the 1580s, containment had become a machine that had to keep running without solving the problem it was built for. Mary could not be trusted with freedom. Elizabeth could not easily justify killing her without proof, and proof meant words, not rumors, not fears. Mary's own words, captured clearly enough to survive a courtroom. That is the gap Francis Walsingham was built to fill. Walsingham did not fill that gap with better guesses. He built a system that made secrecy harder to keep. By the 1580s, Sir Francis Walsingham was Elizabeth's principal secretary, but the title hides how dirty the work could be. His office sat where diplomacy, policing, religion, and espionage crossed. Foreign ambassadors were watched. Catholic seminaries on the continent were monitored. Priests landing in England could be questioned, turned, or followed. Letters moved across borders, and copies of those letters moved quietly to London. This was not modern surveillance. No machines, no invisible electronics, just people, paper, fear, money, and patience. A servant in one house, a courier on one road, a jailer willing to cooperate, an exile who needed protection, an informant who heard a name in Paris or Reims. Each piece alone might be rumor. Together, Walsingham's office could see a pattern. Elizabeth's regime was no longer only reacting to plots after they exploded. It was trying to enter them while they were still forming. That mattered, because plots against Elizabeth were rarely simple. They could involve frightened English Catholics, ambitious young men, Jesuit priests, Spanish hopes, French contacts, and Mary's own court in exile, all moving through coded letters and trusted messengers. Arrests and confessions helped, but against Mary herself, they were not enough. A conspirator could claim he exaggerated her support. A messenger could break under pressure. A minister could warn Elizabeth that danger was coming. None of that solved the legal problem of an anointed queen under guard. Walsingham needed a document that could cross the line from secret to public. Mary's own words, intercepted, deciphered, and preserved. That is why codebreakers mattered as much as guards. Thomas Philippus, one of Walsingham's key men, specialized in turning symbols back into sentences. A cipher meant to protect intimacy could become a courtroom instrument. The machine took shape around Mary, her keeper, her letters, the men trying to reach her, the men pretending to help them, the clerks copying paper, and the cipher experts waiting at the desk. But Mary had been watched for years. She knew letters were dangerous. If she believed every route was compromised, She would write nothing useful. Walsingham's circle needed a channel that felt secret enough for Mary to trust it. The route Mary trusted arrived in an ordinary disguise, deliveries to the house where she was held. By 1586, Mary was at Chartley, under Sir Amyas Paulet, a keeper loyal to Elizabeth's regime. Into this closed world came Gilbert Gifford, a young Catholic messenger who seemed perfect to Mary's supporters, connected, discreet, and willing to move letters past the guards. But the trusted messenger was working with Walsingham. The mechanics were almost brutally simple. Mary's outgoing letters were written in cipher, packed into small bundles, and concealed in the bung of a beer barrel, or in the traffic of supplies moving in and out of Chartley. To Mary, that meant contact. Her voice could reach Anthony Babington and the Catholic conspirators outside. After years of watched rooms and watched servants, the channel must have felt like agency returning. But the route did not bypass Walsingham's machine. It ran through it. Packets were intercepted, opened, copied, and sent to Thomas Philippes for deciphering. Then the letters could continue onward, so the conspirators would keep trusting the channel. Replies came back by the same path, carrying more names, plans, handwriting, and proof. That was the elegance of the trap. It did not silence Mary, it encouraged her to speak. Surveillance had disguised itself as freedom, and every private symbol she sent through that hidden pipeline was being turned into evidence on Walsingham's desk. Now the trap reaches the July document where everything turns. In July 1586, Anthony Babington wrote to Mary in cipher. His letter was not vague court gossip. It described a plan to free her from captivity, backed by Catholic gentlemen and tied to the murder of Elizabeth. For Walsingham, this was the question he needed in writing. Would Mary bless a rescue that depended on killing the English Queen? Mary answered. Her reply moved through the same compromised channel, was opened, copied, and handed to Thomas Philippes. When he deciphered it, the danger was there. Mary did not merely say she wished to be free. She accepted the logic of the plot. She discussed how the attempt should be coordinated, how foreign help and English supporters might work together, and she gave consent to action against Elizabeth as part of her liberation. This is where the story can be misread. Mary was not simply framed by a fake letter. The core reply was real, and it was damning. It gave Elizabeth's government what rumor could not provide. Mary's own words, in a correspondence she believed was secret, linking her to a conspiracy against the Queen who held her. But then the state sharpened the blade. After the letter had been deciphered, a postscript was added in Mary's name, asking Babington to identify the gentleman who would carry out the action. That postscript was forged, not the entire letter. The postscript. That difference is the moral center of the case. Mary's genuine message could condemn her. The forged edition was designed to widen the net, to make Babington expose more names and accomplices. It was not invention from nothing. It was manipulation built onto something real. A Queen's private cipher had already betrayed her intent. Then, a government technician reached into that private exchange and added one more question, not to discover whether a plot existed, but to complete the capture of everyone inside it. And on the back of the deciphered paper, Philippes drew the little gallows, a small mark, almost casual. From here, the document stops being only intelligence. It becomes the road into a courtroom. The courtroom did not begin with a battlefield. It began with paper. By 1586, Elizabeth's government already had a legal weapon ready, the bond, and then the Act of Association. Its logic was brutal because it was tidy. If anyone plotted to kill Elizabeth, and another person stood to benefit from that killing, that beneficiary could be treated as part of the danger. Mary was exactly that person, so when her decoded letters reached the state, they fit into a legal machine built for this moment. At Fotheringhay, in October 1586, Mary was tried before English commissioners. She argued that, as an anointed foreign queen, she was not Elizabeth's subject, and should not be judged by an English court. But the court did not need her to accept its authority. It had the Act, it had Babington, it had the intercepted correspondence, and it had Mary's own consent to the central act of the plot. The verdict was guilty. Then the danger moved to Elizabeth's hand. Executing Mary meant one crowned queen authorizing the death of another crowned queen. It protected Elizabeth's life, but wounded the sacred idea that monarchy stood above ordinary violence. For months, Elizabeth hesitated. Then, in February 1587, she signed the death warrant. With that signature, the surveillance system became irreversible. The opened letters, deciphered symbols, forged postscript, and trial record narrow into one line of ink. The warrant was sent. On February 8, 1587, Mary Stuart was executed at Fotheringhay Castle. But even after the act was done, Elizabeth tried to keep distance from it. She claimed the warrant had been dispatched without her final command. William Davison, the secretary who handled it, was arrested, fined, and imprisoned in the Tower. Maybe Davison exceeded what Elizabeth intended. Maybe he became useful as the man who could absorb blame. The records leave room for argument. Politically, the maneuver is unmistakable. The Queen's hand signed the paper. The state carried out the death. Then the institution found a way to say the fatal motion had slipped from the center into the machinery around it. So the gallows mark was not only a prediction, it was a diagram. Intelligence to evidence, evidence to law, law to warrant, warrant to execution, and finally, execution to denial. After that, the question is no longer only whether Mary plotted or whether Elizabeth survived. It is what kind of ruthlessness won. The ruthlessness that won was not the loudest threat. It was the system that could turn threat into something legible. Mary's ruthlessness was real. From captivity, she reached for dynastic rescue, foreign support, and finally a plot that included Elizabeth's death. Her power moved through hope, bloodline, faith, and fragile human messengers. Elizabeth's ruthlessness worked differently. It had jailers controlling rooms, agents controlling routes, codebreakers controlling meaning, lawyers controlling procedure, and ministers who could carry out a decision while leaving the Queen room to step back. This was never only a story of two women circling one crown. It was a collision between a trapped claimant trying to act in secret and a government learning how to turn secrets into instruments of state. Return to the letter, and the whole story is there. The cipher symbols meant to hide Mary's intentions, the decoded lines exposing her consent, the forged postscript sharpening the trap. The gallows mark understanding where the paper was leading. Mary lost because her private words became public evidence. Elizabeth survived because her state read them first. And in that small, dark mark on the page, you can see the future of power taking shape. Intercept, decode, prosecute, deny.